Hey, I hope everyone is having a great day. And as we are coming back here together again, we want to address a topic that we frequently hear working with our clients. And it's this: why am I always so tired?
Yeah, tired all the time. I just can't ever seem to get rid of this of exhaustion.
And I think all of us have experienced that. I know I can relate to that sometimes. And Laura, I'm sure you can relate to that as well. And it's a big topic because I think we live in a culture that sometimes promotes, though not, let's say, explicitly, but maybe implicitly, burnout. And that may sound so strange to us, but there are a lot of forces outside of us that could be squeezing us into a mold that is really causing us to experience fatigue. And speaking of fatigue, fatigue can be chronic, can it?
Yeah, there's a lot of different forms of fatigue. And, there is definitely chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue is something that occurs because of a physical thing that's going on inside of you. It could be adrenal fatigue. It could come from an immune disorder, thyroid problems, things like that. And you definitely, if you are feeling tired all the time and you can't seem to shake that feeling of being tired, then you definitely need to visit your physician and get anything like that ruled out. But I think what we frequently encounter with clients is just a lifestyle fatigue. And so a lot of times we have to just start looking at lifestyle factors that can.
Occasionally we'll confront a client who comes in and can simply pinpoint the area in their life that is running amok, running out of control. Someone has come well prepared. They've been thorough in investigating their life. They're able to really say, hey, it's because I have 10 things scheduled in one day. Plus, I'm trying to go to work. Plus, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to go to the gym. I'm trying to watch this. I'm trying to watch that. And I got to get in my favorite show before I go to bed. And there's a lot that's going on into their life. However, frequently people come and it's like a mystery. Why am I so tired? Why do I always feel like I'm running on empty? I think you bring up a good point. I think it's wise for us to start and rule things out before we rule something in. Occasionally a client has come to us who has went to see their physician. They've went through the blood tests, the workups, and the physician says, "We really can't find anything. You need to go see a therapist. You need to go work with a coach and figure out what is going on in your life." And I think that's really where we come in to help take the client through a method of deduction in order to discover perhaps parts of their life that could be out of balance.
Correct. And so often one of the first things that we'll do with a client is we have them do something called a wellness wheel. And we have them do this activity. And, I like to start out that activity by kind of giving an example. And do you remember last Thanksgiving when we were on our way to your parents? And um, yeah, we were going along, and what happened?
We're driving along on our way to Tennessee and a little bit north of Nashville. There was this yellow light that came on my dash that indicated something was wrong with one of my tires. So, being wise enough to recognize that, and my OCD when dash lights come on, I really get locked in. I pulled over, and the sidewall of my tire had actually developed a bubble that had popped. The tire was going flat. So there was nothing I could do. I couldn't put air in the tire, so did the best next thing and changed the tire, put on a spare, and you know what? We had to go buy a new set of tires. There,
Right.
there was no
Yeah.
way that we were going to make it to our destination on that donut. That donut would have given out on the other side of Nashville, and that would
Right.
have presented another problem.
Right.
But I could already feel the car swaying, and because it was out of balance, and we needed to stop
Right.
and
You knew
make a
something was
repair.
wrong and did try to, you know, put that donut on and do a little bit of something, but it required, us to actually go to a tire place and get tires put on. And it delayed our trip a bit.
At least 2.5 hours,
Mm,
perhaps.
I
Fortunately,
I
this
think it was more than that.
was it more than
Yeah,
that?
I
Maybe
think it
3?
was. Yeah. And so I mean it really, took a lot out of our journey to get all of that fixed and repaired.
Mm, it
And
sure did.
and so that's the point of a wellness wheel. It is to help you try to figure out what is out of balance, where might bulging or, lopsided. And so there's different domains. There's occupational, there's nutritional, there's exercise, there's sleep, spiritual, and it goes through kind of a ranking
Mhm.
exercise where you rank where you are on this wheel, and it helps you to kind of visually see where you might be out of balance in life. So then you can start working on it, and kind of like instead of putting that donut on, like, whenever you try to just do a quick fix with
Mm.
your health or your exercise, somebody might say, "Oh, I really need to start exercising." And then, they go out and they start running one week and they end up getting, an injury. And then they're completely off, exercise for 3 months because they've pulled a muscle or something like that. So the wellness wheel, helps you to see where you're out of balance. And then, if we're working with a client, then we can help them to put a plan in place. And
Mm.
so that they can work on, all the items that might about this exhaustion in their life.
I think the valuable piece of the wellness wheel is, first of all, it's a visual, and sometimes we have to get what's in our head out of our head and on a piece of paper, and we have to go through discovery. And I think that's the important piece is that we use the wellness wheel during a discovery session. The other part about the wellness wheel is that it's not fixed, it's dynamic. It can change over time, and we can attribute different values to our activities on a sliding scale. I think that's important. And, back to your point about the exercise, a couple of weeks ago, I presented at a conference on faith and work and life. And I had the afternoon session to talk about burnout and how we cope with burnout. And that was one of the examples I used is that once we discover something, we can get really gung ho about it. And we're going to go set the world on
Mhm.
fire. And man, we're going to start running. And, we don't know anything about running, perhaps then that we may need some shoes or we may need some equipment, and all of a sudden we've injured ourselves and then we're worse for wear because
Right.
we regress
Yeah.
back again and now we're experiencing some frustration, some irritation, and that's just building up, probably creating more fatigue in our life.
Right. Right.
So we want to help work with our clients to add some balance to their life, maybe through some brief action plans to work them up to correcting the course, as they're trying
Right.
to lessen the fatigue in their life. And I think that's an important point that you brought out. And have you found that as you work with the wellness wheel, that clients find it to be a valuable graphic that they can use to help align their life?
It helps them to see some areas that they can work on, and then, like I said, we can make a plan. There. Hey, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Um, so what would you suggest for a person that actually there's some things going on in their life that is on their plate and there's change about it. So they, it's causing them maybe some burnout, causing them some what would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I get that question a lot. Um, one of the things that I like to start with is to sort of take them through a process to let them know that the stressor that they're experiencing is tied back to the way they're potentially thinking about the situation. Our body will respond to the environment. We'll feel the emotion of anxiety, which, as you know, can begin the whole spiral and spin of worry. We're worried about something, right? Maybe potentially, and this is something that I address with clients quite often, they're really worrying about their performance. Because quite honestly, I think folks do want to do well.
Right.
They want to be employed, have income to support their family, have income to go on vacations.
Or look like they can manage all the things, you know?
Right. It's almost, and here's the other thing too that I think that we discover is that they attribute some virtue to busyness. It's virtuous to be busyness. And let's face it, sometimes we have conversations just in our own personal life, and you ask people how they doing. They'll say, I'm so busy,
Right. Or fine but busy.
fine but busy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, was that virtuous? Or are you really trying to tell on yourself? Because you really just look worn out to me. So one of the things that I start working on with a client is I want to get into their beliefs and how they're looking at the situation that could be compounding their stress. And as I mentioned earlier, perfectionism is one of the areas that begins to show up. A perfectionist is the type of person that can reach for the stars and only grab stardust. You never really reach the finish line because it's not good enough. One of the things that we can work on is learning to identify the cognitive distortions that you're having about the situation. Like, for example, distortion could be I'm catastrophizing this or I'm magnifying this situation and exploring the rigidity of our thinking. Because once we get locked into something, and the thing about it, we will experience negative emotions much more deeply. We will can get locked into this and it sends us into a spiral and we start living out of that attribution that I have to be perfect in order to get accepted. I have to be perfect in order to get the promotion. Many times what it's doing is leaving us burned out with not enough energy to potentially put in the good work that we need to do. Sometimes we have to step back and say, what about this situation can I control and what can't I control? Well, I obviously can't always control my boss's deadlines, but what I can control is learning how I could potentially influence to have a chance to practice potentially asserting myself and talking about the deadline, potentially going in and advocating for something different. If we look at a situation, we can sometimes turn that around and appraise it differently. For example, you may be dealing with a coworker that is really dealing you a fit. And we find that a lot of our problems are tied back to interpersonal relationships. You may say, I don't like this person. I don't like working with this person. Well, of course, you don't like the person. You don't like working with the person, but good luck on trying to change them. It will burn you out before you probably get any results that you're looking for. What if we appraised this differently? And we looked at this as a situation where potentially you can start working on patience, maybe improving people skills, and maybe perchance working on conflict resolution and how to assert yourself, or just simply how to overlook differences that show up in a workplace and the fact that maybe your values are clashing. So, again, we're working on shifting mindsets. And that's one thing that we can have control over is how we see a situation.
Which in turn lowers stress. Stress levels are lowered, then you're able to better at night,
Mm,
able to eat better or have your digest better, your system start running better. Some of what's contributing to fatigue will be resolved.
exactly. It can begin to affect the whole of your life. And
What about your soul? How this impact?
yeah, that's a really important point too. I think one of the integrated parts of under our soul, just the totality of our being, is our soul needs rest. Our soul needs to be renewed. And some of the ways that we can do that, I believe, is through maybe reading spiritual literature, taking a retreat, taking a walk. I like to cycle, so I go cycling, and that really helps my soul. Hang out with people who support you and whom you support. Maybe meditate, maybe pray. Uh, those are areas in our life that can refresh us and renew us at a much, much deeper level. And I think if we're good in our soul, we tend to be more good with others.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think the word we want to say is let's have compassion for ourselves. Let's have grace for ourselves. And let's give ourselves a break sometimes. We're all trying to figure this out. And, quite honestly, we all need some forgiveness, don't we?
Def-
Yeah, that's an important piece of this whole thing, too. Well, we hope as you had a chance to listen to us that we gave you some tips and some insights that could potentially help you with your exhaustion, perhaps your fatigue, whether it's at a chronic level or not. If it is, by all means, go see your primary care physician. Start there. Get a workup. Find out if there's something else going on, maybe at a metabolic level that you're overlooking. This happened to me years ago, and I was thankful that I was able to get that worked out and get that straightened out in my own life. And if you'd like, drop us a line, drop us a comment. We'd love to hear from you and your experiences and maybe some of the techniques that you use to help with your own fatigue. We are certainly here about opening our minds and learning from not only each other, but from you as well.
Right. Def- So we want to help you live your life's trifecta wellness of body, mind, and soul.
Till next time, stay well.